Let's go to Skype.
Oh, gosh,
let's go to
that's
Skype.
good. I can say hello to Bob in
and
person.
bring in Bob Ford. He is a sports columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Bob, welcome to the show.
You know, the last time I was on, I found this a little unsettling. This is like looking in the picture window of very strange neighbors.
At least we're dressed, Bob. We gave you that.
Yeah, and we get to look right into your house, Bob. You've never invited me over to your house, so this is the only way I could come into your house.
That's correct.
Yeah, Bob is, I've mentioned this when he joined us before, Bob is really one of my favorite people in the whole world. And I wished I got to spend more time with him. One of the great writers of our time and reporters and good people. So,
Bob, we brought you on, but we want to talk Moses Malone. 60 years old, former Philadelphia 76ers great, a three-time MVP, a Hall of Famer. Yet, despite that resume, and I certainly didn't list everything on the resume, despite all that, there's this debate as to whether or not Moses Malone was underappreciated, is underappreciated as one of the all-time greats. What's your opinion on that?
I think a little bit when you look at some of those accomplishments that he had, 12-time All-Star, 3-time MVP, did it back-to-back years with 2 different teams, the only guy that ever did that. But Moses was not a flashy player. He was really one of those, you know, for want of a better term, a workman-like guy. And when you think about those dominant centers of that time, you think about Jabbar, who had that classy skyhook, and a little bit later on you think about Olajuwon with the drop step. You know, it was just really sort of pretty basketball players to watch, and Mo was not that guy at all. But here's a guy who played just a tad under 50,000 professional minutes. He played from the age of 19 to the age of 39. He still holds the record for offensive rebounds, and I think by about 2,000. So yeah, he's a little bit underappreciated. You know, in Philadelphia he's not, because he did what so rarely happens, is that he came to town and delivered on the promise that was made about him, was that this is the final piece. This guy is going to win us a championship. And when he came through, then he became sort of a legend for life here. But yeah, across the spectrum of the NBA, I think of him as a guy like a Bob Lanier, like a Nate Thurman, a guy who's just not as appreciated for anything other than just the fact that he went to work every day.
That's a good point. I saw him in his first professional game. I think also because he got a late, how's this going to sound? This is going to sound strange, but he got a late start. He was coming out of St. Petersburg, Virginia. He was, long before LeBron James, considered the greatest high school player of all, and he came right out of high school and went to the ABA. Kind of got lost in the ABA. As I said, I saw him play the Denver Nuggets in his first professional game.
Utah Stars?
Utah Stars, and it was in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and I thought, this kid from St. Petersburg, D.C. kind of suburb, is now playing in Rock Springs, Wyoming, before about 500 people. And I went up to interview him, and Gerald Govan, who I was close friends with, who played in the ABA, I asked Moses about 5 questions, and I couldn't understand a word he said. And Gerald said, I'll translate for you. I'm happy to be here. He started giving me all the cliches. And Moses was a very quiet man his whole career. He didn't say much, and I think that kind of hurt him, is that he wasn't like Will Chamberlain, that was always talking about himself. He was very quiet. He didn't have a college education. He wasn't, let's face it, he wasn't as mature because of that as he might have been, and he was soft-spoken. And Bob, do you think that may have had something to do with maybe not having the legend outside of Philadelphia?
Yeah, he certainly never tried to sell himself, and he wasn't really interested necessarily in being a media star. He was the same way with his teammates. You know, he didn't hang out with the guys. He didn't run the streets. He didn't go out to dinner. In fact, Moses, who was legendarily frugal, found out early on that if you had room service in the hotel on the road, the team would pick it up, as opposed to if you went out to dinner. So he not only led the league in rebounding, he led the league in room service too. I can guarantee you that.
Bob, I was checking out of a hotel during the final NBA Finals behind him, and when you're in a hotel, as everybody knows, they do a printout. And his printout just went on and on and on and on. You're absolutely right, because he never left the hotel. And finally, they handed him his bill, and he said, I don't want to buy no hotel. I'm just trying to check out. And it was actually a very funny line, and he didn't get credit for being having many funny lines or many memorable lines other than fo, 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 which is what he said before the playoffs start, the year Philadelphia won the NBA championship.
Yeah, he was a very reticent guy, and he was really country. Petersburg, Virginia is not a suburb of D.C. It's way out in the sticks in lower Virginia, and very, very dire circumstances. I went to the University of Maryland, and we were all excited because he had committed to come to Maryland and play on that great team that had Maurice Howard and John Lucas and Brad Davis and Len Elmore, and we were going to win us a championship. And Maurice Howard always tells the story about how dire the circumstances were down there. They went down to help recruit him, some of the players, and picked up Moses. We're riding around with Moses, and they said, well, who's the toughest guy you've ever played with down here? And Moses said, Milkman. And they said, well, why is he called Milkman? And Moses said, because he killed the milkman. And that's an honest, according to Maurice Howard, that's a friend of mine, that's an honest-to-God true story. So things were tough down in Petersburg, Virginia, and that might be why Moses was a little bit reticent about socializing in the outside world, because he didn't have a lot of opportunities growing up.
Bob, was he appreciated by his teammates? I mean, did they realize he was the missing piece? Did Dr. J acknowledge that? Did Mo Cheeks acknowledge that?
Oh, sure. And you had to acknowledge Moses. I remember once Andrew Toney had the ball, and they were trying to call it, Billy Cunningham called a play for Doc. It was C3. And C3 was Moses was going to clear out, and Doc was going to slash in and get the ball and score. And Moses said to Toney, as they're coming out of the huddle, he said, I don't want to run C3. I want to run C5. I want the ball. You get the ball to me. So they went out, and Andrew, of course, called C5. Moses got the ball, and he scores. And they go back to the bench, and Billy was standing there like that, and he says, Andrew, and he had that great Brooklyn accent, Andrew, what play did I tell you to call? He said, you told me to call C3, coach. He said, and what did you call? He said, I called C5, coach. That's what Moses wanted. So, yeah.
I don't know that in life or in basketball you would go against what Moses would say, would you?
True.
Charles Barkley gave him a great deal of credit about actually changing his attitude toward basketball and having a great influence and never taking credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, Charles, in 1984, when he was drafted, he was close to 300 pounds when he came out of Auburn. And he was an immensely talented guy and also a great, as we know, natural rebounder. And, he wasn't getting a lot of playing time from Billy. Billy was really old school, and he wanted to see his guys work, especially rookies. And Charles asked Moses, how come I'm not getting any playing time? And Moses said, because you're lazy and you're fat. And so Moses put Charles on a workout regimen. Moses was a legendary workout guy, too, by the way. He looked like just a natural, but he worked at it. And Charles started to shed pounds, and as the pounds went down, the minutes went up. And, Charles went down to maybe 250, 255 at his prime, and he was a beast then. But at 295, he was still pretty good, but he couldn't get on the floor.
Hey, Bob, really appreciate your time once again. Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter, @BobFordSports.
Easy enough. And, of course, they can read you at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks, Bob. Really appreciate the look back at Moses Malone.
Take care of yourself,
Good
Bob.
seeing you guys. Take care, Woodrow.
We check in every once in a while to make sure you're still alive.
Make sure we survive Tebow mania,
Oh, yeah. you survived it better than we did. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. All right.
Bob Ford of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and all of our guests are brought to you by Papa John's, the official sponsor of the Colorado Rockies. The day after every Rockies win, not today, you get 50% off your online order if you go to papajohns.com and use the promo code ROXWIN, ROXWIN.